Okay, so I'm going to play around here with something new. Um, so I've really been working on the Build in Public Manifesto as kind of the starting point for Build in Public University. And, one of the things that I'm not the best with yet is kind of this individual being on camera presenting. So I am trying to work on that. And so I figured, why not actually just kind of brainstorm this manifesto on camera as a way to showcase some of um, the ideas that I'm working on and kind of work on building up skills at the same time, which is a big part of it. Um, I'm exploring different ways that I can kind of phrase the manifesto as a way to be very, very catchy. And as they see us, I'm trying to think of like a group name because, like, as a builder in public, it's a bit rough. It doesn't have a great sound to it. So um, I've been playing around with different ideas of mascots or things like that to really kind of capture the idea of the university aspect, right? And to really tie that in. I think that is a distinctly American thing, although, again, I'm not terribly familiar with how that works overseas. But, in the U.S., like, I'm a big Buckeye fan, the Buckeyes from Ohio State. So, it's one of those, like, it's kind of this way to identify as part of a group, right? So as I'm trying to build this new institution, I want to give people an easy way to identify with that group. And I want to figure out some way, some representative name that people can proudly claim themselves a part of. And so that's kind of the, this nice spot with the blank in it. And I don't have that yet, but I am working on it. And who knows, maybe by the end of this, I'll have some better idea. Okay, so, this is really about a declaration of belief. And so I started by just writing down the things that I absolutely believe to be true. And so I started with uniqueness over polish. And this is something that I will harp on over and over and over again, because I think right now we are too focused on things being polished and competing against the best of the best in terms of audio production, video production, product. It's more about the polish than about the internals. And so to combat that, I think we really need to bring it back to uniqueness. And if you listen to my podcast, I don't have an intro. The editing isn't like I don't cut out the filler words. I don't do any of that like you'll typically see. And there's all sorts of software to do that. And like Descript is one that when I first started out, I was like, oh, I can just use that to easily cut out the filler words. But I realized that actually reduces the uniqueness. It's like I was trying to compete on this polish, and I'm not going to do that because that's not what I want to compete on. And so I want to compete on the ideas, on the conversations, and that's what it's all about for me. And so my podcast will not grow as fast as some because it doesn't have the polish, and people listen and like, oh, this is a hack job or whatever. But the ones who do listen, they're not going to be distracted by the polish. They're going to get the meat of the conversation. They're going to hear the authenticity in it. And that's what's going to ultimately build relationships. So I'm going to grow slower, but I'm going to be more meaningful in that growth. Transparency over secrets. So one of the big things that I absolutely believe is that we are too focused on the idea of secrets as ways to make a profit. And you see this in the form of, corporate secrets and, industry secrets and all sorts of these ideas that, you've got to maintain that competitive edge. And I think that's all bullshit. And so I will sit here and I will tell you every single insight I have. I will tell you, everything that I find. I will tell you the way I approach things. I'm an open book because I believe that the time for competition is over, and now we need to be more collaborative, because by collaborating, we're going to open up a level and speed of growth that is way beyond what we've got. And that actually reminds me, I should add collaboration over competition to this list, because I do believe that competition wastes energy, it wastes effort. And you know what? There might be some companies that outgrow me. I'm sure there are some that already are, because I don't have the resources to do everything that I want to do. If I could make everything happen that's in my head, I'd be able to start a $1 billion company today, because I've got all of these visions of what could be in terms of building products and doing things that can give people different ways of connecting online and doing all of this. But I realized early on that it's just not going to happen that way. And so instead, I will tell everybody what I'm doing. I will share that, because I think unique insights, unique viewpoints being applied to shared insights can really open up many different avenues of success. And I do believe that at this point in the evolution of humanity, there's absolutely no need to compete. There are so many opportunities to create products and systems that help people on a much more efficient, a much wider scale than has ever been possible before. And so in order to do that as quickly as possible, because there are people out there who need help, who need solutions to problems, they need more efficient ways of doing things. And I think if we can really unlock this idea of collaboration over competition, we can then start to reduce the amount of work we're doing and increase the amount of living that we're doing. And I think that is very, very important in terms of this. And then the next thing I've got here is experimentation over knowledge. So I have talked a few times about the idea of the speed with which technology is evolving and growing, and the fact that it's impossible to keep up with all of it. And so if you're studying how to do different things, if you're studying like aspects, especially related to like business, I think is one of the main places that this really can take hold, is so you learn all these ideas and then you go to implement them, and they don't work quite the same way that you were taught, and you're like, okay, well, I'm doing something wrong. And in reality, these best practices were created at times when things weren't possible to be done as efficiently as they are now. Technologies and software packages and all of that didn't exist. They can do certain things now, and all of that. And so because of the way that this is all coming together, we have to take a different approach. And so it makes a lot more sense, instead of focusing on like, okay, well, I'm going to study all these best practices, I'm going to figure out how to do this the best possible way, and then I'm going to go do it. At this point, take the ideas that you've got and just experiment with them. And I actually wrote a blog post all about kind of how to embrace chaos as a growth lever. And then in a very chaotic way, I lost that blog post because the whole blogging system I set up failed, and it's totally my fault. But the experimentation there really does help. And so the it's all about being able to adapt to change as quickly as possible. And a big part of that is experimenting and then measuring the results, as opposed to having these great ideas about work and then taking forever to implement them to these exact standards. And again, I think it goes back to the uniqueness over polish and all of that as well. There's so many different ways to do things. So it's better to find your own unique ways, figure out what works among those, and then really leverage those to growth. And then kind of the same idea is the doing over learning, right? So instead of focusing on this learning, all these best practices and everything, just try. Get out there, get your hands dirty, start messing around and shit, and really play. Just get in there, play, make a mess, do things, see what happens. That's going to get you a lot further than just learning. And that doesn't mean don't try to learn anything, um, but try to acquire knowledge and practice skills. And so what I mean by that, actually, I'm going to write that down too because I like that idea. So learn about different people's viewpoints. Figure out why they think the way they do. Figure out the models that they use to view the world. And then just let those be. And then in terms of the skill development, practice, 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 try. Just get out there, do it, experiment. And then what you're going to do is you're going to see as you're, doing this, you are figuring out which models are still relevant. And then when you have an idea of what models work and what models people are talking about, you can then start to ask, were those models ever effective? Did they ever accurately represent the world? And if they did, and they don't now, what changed? Because that can be a great way. Excuse me. That can be a great way to really figure out how different things are evolving over time, how different things are changing, and that can really open up some really exciting opportunities there. Sustainability over limitless growth. So this is something I'm a huge believer in as well, and in working with creators and talking with people. One of the things that I try to help them figure out are these sustainable models in terms of how can I put in a set amount of work and be able to scale the output. Not how can I put in as much work as possible and scale that, because that is not sustainable. And so a lot of times, if we're not really thinking about the sustainability aspect, we're only focusing on the growth. We work on growing, and we end up just completely burning ourselves out because we don't focus on the sustainability. So in terms of this, it's all about looking for sustainable levels of growth. You want the inputs to be sustainable and the outputs to have the growth. And so, that way you start building systems where you minimize your own input and you maximize the output that you're getting out of it. And that can help create systems that can give you way more opportunities in terms of spending time actually living your life, enjoying things, and working less. And so it's about efficiency. Like you want to be, as efficient as possible in putting inputs in, getting outputs out. So that's kind of the idea there. And then scale for a purpose, right? Again, this comes from the idea of sustainability, and it's all about being able to have a reason for scaling. And this really gets at your internal why. So why are you doing what you're doing? And if you've listened to the podcast, How to Scale Yourself, we talk a lot about scaling different aspects. And one thing you'll find there is that everybody there had a reason for scaling things the way they did. They had some insight, they had some idea of how things should work, and so they went about scaling some specific aspect of their life, of their business, whatever, in order to achieve a desired outcome. And so when you're thinking about scaling yourself, whether it's building a social media following, whether it's building a business, whatever, you want to really figure out why you're doing it. Because once you have that idea of why you're doing that, you'll be able to then understand how to do it and what parts you should scale, because there's all different parts that you can scale. And again, that's one thing I try to illustrate with the podcast. There's all these different aspects you can scale, but in order to scale them sustainably, effectively, you want to know the purpose beyond that. And so that has a lot to do with the stuff that I'm talking about. And I want to, so my purpose here, the scale that I'm trying to approach, is because I see the world changing. I see ways that we are building a whole bunch of systems that are not sustainable, and they're coming close to collapsing because they're just not built to sustain the various pressures that they're under, and there are things that are going to start failing. And in order to make it as soft of a landing as possible from these systems failing, I want to give people opportunities and ideas and systems and thoughts on ways to break away from those systems and build their own systems that are sustainable, that can support them, because that is going to be so necessary in the coming years, just because of the way the economy is starting to fracture, break apart. It's not this sustainable thing because we've got different economies in existence right now. So we've got the exponential growth economy and the linear growth economy. The exponential growth economy is all about information, data. It's about scaling your outputs. And then there's the linear economy, the wage base. So you're getting paid for your time. And if you're getting paid for your time and there's a bunch of people who are getting paid with these exponential outcomes, they're going to keep growing much faster than you. And it's going to become harder and harder to sustain your lifestyle. You can't even sustain it. It's just going to keep shrinking, and that's something I've discovered. And so that's the big reason why I want to give people new ways of doing things. I think we need to rethink how we work, how we learn, and all of that. And so Build in Public University is my attempt to share what I'm learning, what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it, so that others will be able to have that same opportunity that I've got. And that's kind of where all of this comes from. And then, to getting to this idea of community as a shared media outlet. So why does media exist? Media exists to amplify important ideas. And if you look at kind of the so-called mainstream media, they are trying to figure out how to tell us what's important so that they can get the clicks they need, because those are not sustainable business models. And because they're not sustainable business models, all they can focus on are the metrics of clicks, views, whatever. And when everybody's competing on clicks and views, they start reporting on the more extreme stuff, because as that goes on, everything, the stuff that gets views is the most extreme stuff. It's the highest emotional reaction. It is the stuff that provokes the most outrage, and that's where you see this division coming in, because with outrage, it's like, you try to present one side in the most outrageous light possible in order to get the clicks from the other side, and it kind of creates this natural division. And so the way to combat that is to really have communities come together and figure out what's actually important, and figure out how to represent that in the most accurate way possible. And, right now we focus a lot on the individual as the media outlet. And so that's the social media, right? But what you don't see is under the hood, behind the scenes, there's all of this collaboration that goes on. People are presenting ideas with specific goals in mind. They want to get people thinking about things certain ways. And so there's a lot of manipulation that goes on behind the scenes. And to combat that, I think we really need to focus on communities that we know, that we trust, as ways to help us figure out what's important, because right now there's so much information flying around. It's impossible to filter it all as an individual. And kind of, so a lot of people just set up really basic filters as to if it's coming from this side, it's legit. If it's coming from this other side, it's fake news. And again, that's just not a great way to go about it, because people manipulate those fast filters, and they start trying to get us outraged, and figuring out all of this stuff is just very difficult. And so by coming together as a community and sharing what's important to us, and then amplifying that as a community, we can really start fighting back against this outrage machine that is the kind of typical media now. And yeah, so Build in Public University, it's a community media outlet. I believe that people building in public are important. I want to help them amplify their messages, because I think we can show a much better world than what is typically seen by the overall world population. Um, I see people doing very, very cool things, and I want to help them amplify that. And it's not the people who are the most well connected. It's not the people who have the best funding. It's the people who are just building shit because they enjoy building it, because they care about the people they're helping. That's what I want to showcase. And then finally, this last idea is this, students or teachers and vice versa. And if you've ever seen the movie Accepted, it has a lot to do with that same kind of idea, where the kids like form the university and they like go there and they just teach all this weird shit. And it's to kind of like their parents expect them to go to college. They don't get accepted or whatever, so they build their own college. And that is kind of, it's definitely got a lot to do with the way that I view this. And I think traditional educational institutions are inefficient and lacking and overpriced. They're not necessarily bad, but the value isn't there, and I don't think they're nearly as needed as they used to be. So this is a good way to bring people together. The professors that I'm focusing on bringing in are the people who are actually out doing stuff. And then as students come in and they kind of go through this basic process of learning how to share the important stuff, the unique stuff, their story, what matters, I want them to be available also as professors and teach the things that they know and offer insights into, that are born from their experiences. And, I really do think that we all have information that we can share with each other. And this idea of having to go to school for so many years to become an official teacher, it makes sense when you think of a teacher having n number of students that they have to teach. You have to be able to adapt to all sorts of different learning styles. But in reality, it's actually much, much easier to share insight one-on-one or in very small groups. And so that's what I'm focusing on. If we increase the number of teachers to match the number of students, you end up getting all of this one-on-one attention specifically in the areas that you need when you need it, and it becomes more efficient. And so that is the final aspect of the Build in Public Manifesto for now. And it's going to be an evolving, adapting thing as I really start to, figure it all out. But in the ideas of the manifesto, I'm being transparent with it. I'm shooting for uniqueness. I'm not worried about the polish. It's going to be rough because it's not something that is meant to stay static. That's one of the nice things. When you focus on the uniqueness and you say that this is not a static document, this is a living, evolving thing, you don't need to worry about the polish because it's not done. It's never done. That's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect because it's not done. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And so that is what I am really shooting for here. And so, that's what it is. Would love to get thoughts, comments, whatever you've got. Let me know what you think. And hey, thanks for watching.